Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming or joining us for our webinar this evening. Autism Family Services of New Jersey is proud to have Hillary Freeman present for us tonight. She is an attorney with experience representing clients in special education and Section 504 issues, higher education issues, including accommodations, on testing and graduate school admission tests, guardianship matters, estate planning, and adult services. Hillary was named a Rising Star by Super Lawyers magazine for 2013, an honor that only the top 5% of lawyers in the state are selected for. She holds a JD from Widener University School of Law and practices in both Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Hillary is going to talk for us tonight on the Common Core standards and development of standards-based individualized education programs. And we are happy to have her present, and I'm going to change it over to her now so that she can begin the webinar.
Thank you very much. 1 minute for... Okay. Thank you. And my name is Hillary Freeman from Freeman Law Offices, and we have offices in Princeton, Freehold, and Haddonfield, New Jersey. A little bit about me. I have a brother with autism. He is 40 years old, and he currently lives in a group home. He's autistic and functions on approximately the 2 to 3 year old level. And that's really how I got involved in this, watching my family advocate for him. I was involved in that, and then through the years I just developed a very big interest in advocating for individuals with disabilities across their lifespan. So today I'm going to talk to you about the Common Core State Standards, or otherwise known as the Common Core Curriculum Standards, the development of the standards-based IEPs. This is an area that a lot of parents I've noticed have been really concerned about, because the core curriculum content standards are really written, they were initially written for regular education students, and they were written to establish standards for any and all student to achieve by the time that they graduate from high school. And they're supposed to be aligned with the goals in the IEP, and a lot of parents are saying, well, my child can't achieve that goal, or they have no, it doesn't make sense, because my child, who cares about whatever the Common Core standard is with regard to my kid? I just want them to learn how to read, do math, add, subtract, or maybe even speak. So who cares about that? And tonight I'm going to talk to you about why they're important and how to make it adaptable so your kid can benefit from these standards as well. So I'm not going to be able to answer questions tonight. I'm going to encourage you, if you have any questions, to go to email me at the later or another day at hillary@freemanlawoffices.com. It's just going to be too complicated to answer questions on this particular topic through the webinars. Okay, so this is the agenda for tonight. I'm going to give you an overview and how they came about. It's going to include a conversation about No Child Left Behind. And then I'm going to talk about the evolution of the IDEA, how it changed over the years, and how it developed, and what the most recent version means for you. And I'm going to talk about supporting students with disabilities and relating students' goals with the Common Core standards, and then how to develop high-quality goals and objectives. I'm going to talk about transition, and then I will end with an activity for you to develop yourself, for you to develop goals yourself. It's kind of fun. Okay, so to get started, the No Child Left Behind, it was written really in 2001, and the idea was, it was mandated that states will create minimum knowledge tests in the 4 core subjects: math, English, science, and social studies. And each year, the purpose and what it's supposed to be doing, or was written for, is to say that each year schools needed to show an improvement of the previous year's data towards the goal of 100% of passing of all the tests. This was called adequate yearly progress. The tests were mandated at the federal, but the problem was with all of this, with No Child Left Behind, is the government said, we're going to write this law. You have to teach all of these subjects. We have to create a minimum knowledge, minimum standards. So you have to teach the students so they learn at this particular level, or at least at this particular level. But don't worry, we're going to create this federal guideline or standard. States, we're going to leave it up to you to come up with the individual tests. So while there was an idea that it's supposed to have a national standard, you had 50 states coming up with their own individual tests on these different subjects. So it didn't work because it wasn't consistent across the board. Okay, so it's the impact of No Child Left Behind. It required states to develop challenging content standards and academic assessments, and it held the states accountable for the results. Each state must create annual assessments based on the state standards, which measure what children know and are able to do in reading and mathematics in grades 3 through 8 and at grade 11. Science will be assessed at grades 4, 8, and 11. And then No Child Left Behind also further required that students be taught by highly qualified teachers and that research-based methodologies will be used in the classroom. The highly qualified teachers and research-based methodologies, these are pretty key terms because these are terms that were also adopted by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the law that governs children with special needs, the ones that have IEPs. This whole presentation, by the way, it's not limited to students with IEPs. It also applies to students with 504 plans as well. And I'll get into how, as you'll see it throughout the presentation. So this is the Common Core State Standards Initiative. This was a state-led effort by governors and school chiefs to establish a single set of clear educational standards to prepare students for college and career readiness. What was happening was a lot of colleges and corporations, major corporations, were complaining that students who graduated from schools in the United States were graduating with really they were not ready they were not prepared for college. They didn't have the skills to learn independently. They didn't have the skills to succeed in the corporate environment. So pretty much everyone was complaining that the students were graduating and they weren't ready to graduate. So the governors and school chiefs and the teachers and a lot of different educational experts got together and said, that we need to come up with standards of what everybody is going to learn. And we're not just talking about minimum standards. We're saying this is a minimum. These are the areas and goals that need to be established. They're not just, unlike No Child Left Behind, they're not just tests. They're clear standards, and there are tons of them. They're not just there are countless numbers, and you can Google it on the internet to get an idea of what some examples of the standards, what the standards are. In this presentation, I have listed a few, but in an effort to not put you to sleep, I didn't list all of them. But the idea was they broke the skills down to make sure that students really did have all of the skills necessary to be successful in the post-secondary environment. They didn't just cover a particular area. So the federal government didn't say you have to adopt, every state has to adopt the core curriculum content standards. They said the federal government said they're optional, but we would recommend that you do it. So all but 3 states have adopted the core curriculum content standards, not all at the same time, but all but 3 did. And the ones that did not are Texas, Nebraska, and Virginia. New Jersey definitely has. Pennsylvania implemented it this year. New Jersey implemented it a few years ago. So they're definitely in place, which means that the schools are required to teach to the Common Core standards. So why is this important? Like I was talking about before, the corporations and colleges were complaining that students weren't ready to graduate. So they came up with the standards so they can be prepared to take on the rigors of new workforce demands. The proportion of American workers in blue-collar and administrative support positions plummeted from 56% to 39% between 1969 and 1999. That's huge. Okay. The share of jobs requiring more education and specialized skill, technical, managerial, increased from 23% to 33% in the same time period. So not just students, employees could not just get away with general skills. They really needed to learn technical skills in order to be successful in the post-secondary environment. 4 decades ago, the U.S. had the best high school graduation rate in the world, but by 2006, it slipped to 18th out of the 24 industrialized countries. Again, that's a problem. We've dropped considerably since 4 decades ago, and we needed to obviously find out what was going on and make sure that doesn't happen again. So the federal assessments, this is really goes by, the ASK assessments. These are the assessments that initially were under No Child Left Behind, and then now they're coming up with different assessments to make sure that students are achieving the core curriculum content standards. There's a different opinions regarding the testing requirements from the federal government. Some say this is horrible because you're teaching to the test. Others are saying no, it's actually a really good idea because you're making sure that they achieve these standards. It's not a lot of people are concerned about these assessments because they're saying this is going to create a ceiling for students or for teachers to teach. It's not going to create a minimum standard. It's going to create a ceiling. So the theory is, or the argument is, once you've achieved this standard, teachers have done their job, and that's not what the laws state in this. They say it's a minimum standard. You can certainly go above that if the student has already learned the skill. There's nothing to prevent the teachers from teaching beyond that. So 2 groups developed the tests to make sure that they're appropriate and they're taught to these areas, and these are the two different groups. It's CCSS PARC and the Smarter Balance Consortium. Unlike the No Child Left Behind tests, it will be possible to make comparisons across state lines because both the standards and the test assessments are identical. These are 2 organizations, not 50 states. Okay, that's obviously much better than having 50 different tests, actually more than that, because you have tests in different areas. The 2 groups doing it versus 50 different states doing the tests is obviously will allow for more consistency. The different subject areas that these standards address are not limited to reading and math and writing. They address visual and performing arts, comprehensive health and physical education, language arts literacy, mathematics, science, social studies, world languages, technological literacy, career education, and consumer, family, and life skills. Those are a lot of different areas because, again, these are the areas that you need to be successful in various environments, at least to be exposed to it, exposed to these areas so students can learn or maybe develop an interest. They're not limited to reading, math, and writing, and math. So these standards, the development of these standards, they establish clear expectations of what a student should know and be able to do. They don't teach the teachers how to teach, okay? They establish areas that need to be taught, but they don't tell the teachers you have to teach in this particular way. I mentioned before, and this is really important, it's a baseline, it's not a limit, okay? So if the student already has the skill, then they should go beyond that, and they should increase the standards so it's something they haven't attained, and then work towards attaining that particular skill. They set grade-specific standards. They do not define the interventions or supports for students with special needs or students who may have mastered the material already. This is a bit where Section 504 comes into play. I'm going to briefly and very briefly go over the differences, or what have been perceived to be the differences of an IEP and a 504 plan, and I'll take it a little bit further to explain Section 504. And when a student has a disability or they have special needs and they need to remediate the deficit, fix it so it doesn't interfere with their ability to make progress, they get an IEP, and that's specially designed instruction to remediate the deficit. Okay, that's an IEP. It's like if you break your ankle and you need a cast, the cast is supposed to fix the problem. A 504 plan has always been viewed as to be an accommodation plan. So if you break your ankle and you need a cast, that's an IEP because it fixes the problem. However, if you break your ankle and you get crutches, a cane, or a wheelchair to get you through to the next step, it's always been viewed as the 504 plan. And that view is not wrong. That is what the law provides. However, taking it a step, really going back to the reasons that these laws were written, Section 504 was written to give equal access to the education curriculum as typically developing peers. It wasn't just to give accommodations to get them through to the next step. It's part of it, but the real reason that the law was written, it's a civil rights law. It's to give equal access to for students with disabilities to the education that the typical students are getting. So when we talk about the Common Core State Standards, the reason that this is so significant is because these are written for general education students. So now you need to make sure that your children with special needs are getting the right supports and services necessary, all of the research-based curriculum, the highly qualified teachers, the accommodations, to enable the students to benefit from the education just like typically developing peers. It's equal access to the curriculum. Okay, so the Common Core State Standards, going back to that a little bit, they don't provide a complete scope and sequence, so they don't tell the teachers, like I said before, how to teach. They don't give the students, they don't give the teachers an entire methodology. They give an outline of the most important and essential skills and knowledge every student needs to master to succeed in college and careers. Okay, they don't provide the entire outline. They don't say every skill the student should have. They say it's an outline of the most important and essential skills that every student needs to master to succeed in college and careers. You're building to mastery, not proficiency. This is a big difference from No Child Left Behind. The No Child Left Behind, they were using standardized assessments, and they were saying the students had to memorize facts, become proficient at tasks, and answer questions by using strategies and making it work. However, the Common Core Standards say that students will be expected to master the concepts, not just become proficient in it, engage in deep analytical thinking and problem solving. This is important all the way around because you have to be able to assess a situation, even social skills, emotional development, critical thinking. You have to be able to assess a situation, analyze it, and respond to it very quickly in order to succeed in any environment. So that these are the skills that are being targeted in different subjects in different ways. Okay, so the idea is they're supposed to master concepts, not just become proficient in the tasks. So in order to support students with disabilities, you're supposed to be building IEPs that reflect the Common Core State Standards. And this is giving equal access to the education curriculum to make sure that The student, you assess the standard, you look at where your child is or the student is, what they're able to do, and what supports do they need to also master the standards that everybody else, the skills that everybody else is expected to master. So let's go from the bottom up in this pyramid. There's the present levels of academic and functional performance. This is usually on the second to third page of the IEP. And this is where you really look to what can your child do in terms of emotional development, academics, functional life skills, social skills, behaviors. This is where you look to what are your child's strengths and weaknesses, okay, and you really do go into detail here. So you want to understand what academics, as an example, can they read at a third grade level, but can they comprehend at that level? Do they know the entire alphabet? Can they add and subtract single-step problems, multi-step problems? Can they write in print or in script? Can they use a computer? Do they have behaviors? Behaviors, I mean in a very loose sense. It can be from disrupting a class to hitting somebody else, to yelling and screaming, or it can be, do they just sit in silence and do they get distracted very easily? Do they pick their skin, pull their hair? They're a bunch of different. Do they just doodle their name all day long? These are some different behaviors I'm talking about. If they, in terms of social skills, can they initiate a conversation? Do they respond to the conversation? Can they take turns? Do they only talk about what they want to talk about, or can they talk about things that others want to talk about? We really want to be specific here in identifying what the child's profile is, because this is where you're saying what they can do and what they can't do. And then the IEP is based off of that. You look to their needs. What do they need to be successful and achieve the same goals that everybody else is achieving? Then you look to, well, is their disability impacting them? Is their disability impacting their ability to master those skills? That's your eligibility. And if so, do they need specially designed instruction to benefit from their education, or do they need accommodations to benefit from their education? So you look to where they are, what do they need, what's preventing them from getting there, what are their goals and objectives, where should they be in a year from now. You look to where they were, where are they now, and where should they be in a year from now. And those are the goals. They're supposed to be annual. They're supposed to be attainable. So they're supposed to be theoretically be able to be mastered within 1 year, because the IEPs are annual IEPs. Okay, and then you take it one step further and you look at the services. What services does my child need to get from where they are now to where we're saying they should be in a year? Okay, does that require speech and language instruction, not just for articulation, but for pragmatics as well? Do they need specially designed instruction, maybe for reading, like Orton-Gillingham methods, which are research-based, Wilson methods? Do they need ABA instruction, applied behavioral analysis, for students with autism, or even any other developmental disability? Do they need floor time? Do they need a one-to-one aid? Do they need an extended school day program? So it's instruction beyond the typical school day to help the student generalize their skills from one environment to another. Do they need an extended school year program? One way of getting an extended school year program which is instruction over the summer, is if they regress over breaks and it takes a long time to recoup those skills later on. You also can look to the severity of your child's disability, if they're on the brink of learning new skills. As an example, if they're learning to communicate at the end of the year, you're not going to stop the instruction on how to communicate just because it's the summer. They might require extra instruction to learn how to communicate. These are just different examples of what can be put in place to help your child get from point A to point B. You look at the accommodations and modifications. Do they need extended time on an exam? Do they need somebody to help write their exam? Do they need an extra set of books or maybe an iPad? Do they need somebody to take frequent breaks during the day? Again, these are just some examples. You're not limited to these examples. And then you say, all right, well, where should my child be placed in order to succeed and learn all of these skills? You can be very creative here. It can be in the typical or general education environment. It can be in a classroom where it's being taught by a regular education teacher and a special education teacher. It can be in a more restrictive setting, such as maybe a resource room or a self-contained room, which are classrooms primarily made up of students with special needs, and then or an out-of-district placement, which is a private school that specializes in the area of your child's disability. Where should these services? Where can your child benefit from all of these services in the most appropriate way? And then so altogether, that makes up your IEP, the Individualized Education Plan. To take it one step further, this is a lot of text, but I want to talk, this is a very important slide because this is where you're talking about what will your child be doing when they graduate. And there's a lot of, the way the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the way it developed, it really took a big turn from 1975. The first act, which is the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, it implied that students with special needs would have the same access to programs as students without disabilities, including whatever vocational educational programs were available. So it said same access. This is what I was talking about before with equal access. Then you go to the amendments of 83 and 86. It provided discretionary funding for school-to-work model programs, but did not require transition services for students with special needs. It didn't require transition services. That's the big piece of this. Then you go to the reauthorization, which is the IDEA of 1990, and included language requiring it included language requiring needed transition services in the IEP by 16 or younger if deemed necessary. In New Jersey, you start transition planning at 14, not at 16. So we are actually, you're entitled to services at a younger age. The IDEA amendment of 1997 said that it changed the required service age from 16 to 14 to allow for additional planning and education for full community integration, and for those students with a desire to attend a post-secondary educational institution. And then you have the last one. It changed the service age language to beginning not later than the first IEP in effect when the child is 16, and updated annually thereafter, which means that you can start it. They're required, and according to federal guidelines, they have to start providing the transition services by 16. They can start earlier if deemed necessary, but they have to, at the latest, start transition planning at 16. I'm going to go break it down a little bit. I don't want to just read the text off the slides. Again, the reason that I'm focusing so much on transition is because this is essentially, they cover really all the different areas. You look to what skills does your child need to be successful in any post-secondary environment. What is their ultimate goal? Where do they want to work? Do they want to go to college? Do they want to go to a 2-year college or a 4-year college? Do they want to go into a vocational program? And then you look to break it down and say, what skills does my child need to be successful in that environment? The core curriculum content standards, they say typical students are entitled to structured learning experiences. They're entitled to internships. They're entitled to guidance, in helping with resume writing, interviewing skills. These are for general education students. A lot of schools or child study teams have taken the position for students with autism or other developmental disabilities a lot of schools have taken the position of, well, we'll just invite the Division of Developmental Disabilities in for a meeting, and then we'll leave it at that, and that's your transition plan. Well, that's not good enough. Now we have a clear distinction of what general education students are entitled to, and we can say, well, my child is entitled to the same thing. So you look to their goals and what services do they need to get to their goal. Maybe it's job sampling to identify an interest. Maybe it's you can think outside the box. If they want to work in a hospital setting, then they're going to need social skills. They might need to learn how to get there. They need to learn advocacy skills. They need to learn to be sensitive. And this can be, and then you say, break it down a little bit further, and you can say, well, what services does my child need to learn those skills? Maybe social skills instruction, maybe driver's ed, maybe a job coach to help them learn the social skills, or learn how to self-advocate for themselves. Well, self-advocate for themselves is a bit redundant, but you get the idea. There are a lot of skills that are necessary, and students with special needs are entitled to that instruction as well. So the IDEA of 97 and 04, they make it clear, and also Section 504, the 504 plans also provide for this. They're introducing the requirement that students with disabilities must have access to the general curriculum. And you do this by going to present levels of performance, how the disability affects involvement and progress in the general curriculum. You look at the goals to enable them to progress in the general curriculum. You look at the accommodations so they can help be involved in the general curriculum. Then there's the explanation of why they shouldn't be in what's preventing them from participating in the general ed class. And then and then you go into they're supposed to be assessed within the same format as the general education students. You're not supposed to forget about them just because they have disabilities. I'm going to just give you a break to read this a little bit, because I know it's a lot of text and I'm using a lot of big words, so I'm going to take a slight break just so you can have time to read this. This is just another comparison of the IDEA of 97 versus 04. The big thing that I just want to point out from this slide is that in the second box, you can see that 1997 version of the IDEA just requires academic goals. The reauthorization of the IDEA in 2004 requires not just academic goals, but they look to functional goals as well. So make it adapt to the real world. Make the goals adapt to the real world. It's not just understanding geometry or astronomy. You really want to make sure that people can make the connection with reading and why it's significant, and maybe an example of reading signs in the hallway or on the street, or making a purchase. Not just looking at coins and saying, okay, this is a quarter, a dime, or a nickel, but apply it to something. Make a purchase, get the change, count the change, things like that. Saying hello and not just scripted language. So you're not just saying, so for example, with my brother, if you ask him, how are you, he'll automatically respond with, I'm fine. And then now we're prompting him to say, how are you? But not all, but a lot of students can learn more, I would say more socially appropriate language. While that's appropriate, it's saying I'm fine all the time is not necessarily functional, because you never know if he's really fine. You really have to look at the change in his behaviors. Hopefully you're teaching students to express express how they're feeling in different ways to the maximum extent that you can. And so that's the big difference between 97 and 04. You're looking to the not just academic, but you're really looking to functional goals as well. I hope this is making sense to everybody. What skill do you, I love this graphic. What is a skill that you think of when you hear the term functional? In today's functional skills, you look to attending to the teacher or speaker. I hope you're all paying attention to me. I know I haven't lost any of you with this. Following directions, getting out materials, requesting attention. These are just some examples. Responding to directions, interacting with classmates. It helps to interact with classmates. You can learn from them. You can learn from your peers. You can learn to take turns. You can learn to express your ideas, articulate your thoughts. Self-advocacy, attending to a task, decision-making, problem-solving, reading, writing, and math. So I make this comparison between traditional functional skills and today's critical skills. Functional skills, making change, identifying signs, a stop sign as an example. A red light means stop, green light means go. Or even recognizing, social cues. So if you're talking to somebody and they turn around and walk away, one might be able to infer that they're not paying attention anymore. Self-care skills, naming colors, pre-vocational tasks, travel skills. Other critical skills are communication, decision-making, self-advocacy skills, using technology, literacy, math, and social interaction. There are core curriculum content standards that address all of these different areas. So the students with special needs are entitled to goals that address these areas as well. Something that's pretty key is a lot of schools will tell you, these are the standards, we can't modify the standards for your child. We have to, this is a standard, this is the standard that we're going to put as a goal in the IEP. That's not what the law says. They're supposed to teach in that particular area, but the goal should be broken down to teach the child the basic skills necessary to achieve that ultimate goal. And so at whatever level they're at. So you're not supposed to just take an 11th grade goal if the student, a reading goal, if the student is reading at a 4th grade level. It's there because you really need to break it down to their unique needs and what skills do they need to work on to learn that ultimate goal. And remember, if a student has an IEP, they're entitled to an education until June following their 21st birthday. They may be, unless they accept a diploma earlier. So if they have not mastered all of these goals by the time they turn 18, they can get a certificate of completion at 18, but they can walk across at the stage at graduation with all of their friends. But they might be entitled to more services, maybe even outside of the school environment when they graduate, and when they turn 18 or after that quote-unquote graduation. There are transition programs that exist to help students learn these other functional skills after they've completed their courses in the high school. So this is a pretty important slide. It's important not to assume that general education classrooms are non-functional for some students. I like this slide because I've had a lot of cases where students they might not be able to understand the curriculum, so they're just placed in a self-contained setting. And a lot of students can benefit, they can really benefit from the general education environment, even though they're not necessarily understanding all of the content. Some student, I had a case where the student was nonverbal, and we were trying to get them to use an augmentative communication device, and they really weren't seeing the benefit of using the augmentative communication device. So coincidentally, in this particular school, there was another student who had one, and was in a less restrictive setting, and they were using the device to pick up girls. he was flirting with girls with the device. So suddenly the other student, he started using his device because he wanted to learn to pick up girls too, which was a lot of fun to watch because it really did work. And so they might not be the student might not have really understood the general content, but he did learn what the purpose, well, one of them, not the purpose, but one of the benefits of using his device was he could pick up a girl. And obviously that's a very important skill to have in society. I'm very sarcastic, by the way, in case you haven't learned through this presentation. Okay, so this is a summary of the IDEA and the No Child Left Behind. IDEA requires that students with disabilities have access to the same curriculum according to their unique needs as students without disabilities, so they can meet the educational standards that apply to all children. That's the core curriculum content standards. And then No Child Left Behind establishes the expectation that students with disabilities can meet the same standards as students without disabilities. Okay, I hope you're all hanging in there. I only have 77 slides to go. I'm kidding, that was a joke. You can laugh later. Individuals with Disabilities Improvement Act. There are three main components. You have stage 1, which is accessibility. Stage 2, this is, again, this part of the presentation I'm really trying to apply to you'll see more of the application to the IEP. You have accessibility to the general education curriculum. You have involvement in the curriculum, and you have progress in the general education curriculum. So I'm going to just take a break and give you a moment to review the slide. Okay, and then you go into what are the IEPs, the standards-based IEPs. You're supposed to be using grade-level academic content standards as a guide for determining what each student should know and be able to do. It's a guide. It's not the ultimate goal. Okay? So you're supposed to incorporate the state standards into the development of the goals, but it's not supposed to be the goal for all students, meaning the IEPs, the goals at the end of the IEP, they're not just supposed to be the state standards. They're supposed to be on there so you have an idea of what you're ultimately achieving, but then you have your child's individualized goals to help them learn the skills so they can achieve the ultimate standard. Okay, and then you're supposed to align the goals with the grade level curriculum to ensure that they are getting equal access to the curriculum as the typical developing student. The purpose of this is to increase the expectations for learners and improve access to the curriculum, to make sure or ensure that students are given the best opportunity for access to the curriculum and participate in district-wide and state assessments. And then I just give you a little history behind this. Historically, the performance of special education students was left to the subjectivity of the teacher. Reporting that the student was doing well might mean that they were doing great in the 3rd grade curriculum, but not in the 5th grade curriculum. So it establishes a little bit more of a clear guideline so you understand how your child is doing. I'm giving you a second to read it. So again, you want to significantly narrow the scope of the content and deepen how time and energy is spent in the math classroom. Again, this is just an example. And focus deeply only on what is emphasized in the standards so the student gains strong foundations. You can't teach a student to add and subtract multi-step problems before you teach them how the numbers, what addition means, okay, how to add a single-step problem before going into a multi-step problem. You have to establish the foundations. It's like writing. You can't teach a student to write an essay before you teach them how to write, meaning literally write. Make sure that they understand the letters, what a sentence is, and what a paragraph is. You have to give them the foundation, and that's what your individualized goals are supposed to be. You want to carefully connect the learning within and across grades so that the student can build new understanding onto foundations built in previous years. This is really what I was just saying before. You're connecting from what the student learned in second grade to third grade to fourth grade. And again, you want to go according to your child's needs, not the general. You look to what their students' peers are learning, but you want to make sure that they have the foundation to learn the ultimate goal. This is an example. The coherence and sequential nature of mathematics dictate the foundational skills that are necessary for the learning of algebra. The most important foundational skill not presently developed appears to be proficiency with fractions, including decimals, percents, and negative fractions. This is a lot of text, I know that. The teaching of the fractions must be acknowledged as critically important and improved before an increase in student achievement in algebra can be expected. Again, this is establishing the foundation before they can learn, understand algebra itself. What must an IEP contain? Disregard the transitions. I didn't know how to get rid of them. Okay, so you look to the reason that this is a bit of a review, but the reason that this is brought up now is because you look to that goal that I just mentioned, and then you say, well, what is your child? What can your child do right now? Okay, and then you look to where they need to be, and what services do they need, and what instruction do they need to achieve that ultimate goal. Okay, I'm going through this a little bit fast because it's review. We talked about the specially designed instruction. These are the accommodations. In writing the IEP, if your child is in a regular education or general education class, the general education teacher has to understand the IEP as well. It's usually, if they have an IEP, the child study team is writing the IEP, and hopefully the regular education teacher is reading it. They're not going to apply it if they don't understand what the accommodations are. They really need to be clear so they can be applied to all different environments, not just the child study team environment or an IEP meeting. To determine, and I apologize for all of the text, but I couldn't really think of a way of breaking it down. When you're assessing the alignment to the core curriculum content standards, you look to the general education curriculum, and you look to where your child is. Okay, everything needs to be clear so the general education teacher can understand it. You refer to the district curriculum standards to make sure that your child is learning those same skills and they're not being left out of the process just because they have special needs. And then you reflect the state standards and you make sure that your children are, again, not left out. That's a big part of this. You want to make sure that they're getting the right instruction so so they don't just graduate with no skills. You really need to teach them as much as they can learn so they can be successful in the environment wherever they want to be. This is what we look to in determining whether they are aligned. I look to what the grade level standards are. I look to the instruction. Are the students with special needs getting the research-based instruction that they are required to get, okay, or entitled to get, or are they just getting random programs that are just thrown together are they made up at the last minute? They're really entitled, just like the general education students. The students with special needs are entitled to research-based instruction. Okay, so because otherwise it's the same idea. They're not, as general education students, they're not going to benefit from their education if they're just, maybe not as much, they might benefit if there's just a curriculum being thrown together because that's what they came up with. It does need to be research-based to address their disabilities as well. And then you look to the assessment items. How are they being assessed? Are they being assessed the same way as their typically developing peers? Or are they being really modified, somewhat modified? Or is it a completely different test? Or are they not being tested at all because they're just being waived out of it? I'm going to skip over this slide, and it's just a review. So to get into some of the standards a little bit, I mentioned previously that there are a lot of different areas that the students need to be successful in college and the post-secondary environments. So the standards are very, very wordy, and that's the reason that I didn't put in every single standard imaginable. I picked a few different key areas and to give you an idea of what we're talking about when I refer to the standards. Read closely to determine what the text says explicitly and to make logical inferences from it. Cite textual evidence when writing or speaking to support conclusions drawn from the text. What are we trying to figure out? How to it's an area of close analytical reading. I'm learning to read myself right now. Another standard, determine central ideas or themes of a text and analyze their development, summarize the key supporting details and ideas. You're looking for the main idea and supporting details. This is important if they want to be successful in college or in any environment. They need to learn to pick out, not just with reading, but pick out the important concepts to focus on in whatever, in any career. What they need to focus on the areas to help them achieve what they ultimately want to achieve. And then analyze how and why individuals, events, and ideas develop and interact over the course of a text. Character and plot analysis. Okay? So I'm using my hands, which you can't see right now, but on the right side of this slide, these are the target areas, and then on the left side, these are specific standards that the child or student needs to learn to learn the ultimate goal. Okay, the ultimate standard. So they're broken. So these target areas are addressed at every single grade level, but on the left side of the screen, we're talking about standard, what they should achieve at a particular grade level. This is the same idea. I'm not going to make you go through every single word, but on the right side of the screen, which is more important, you want to look to the meanings of word and phrases, text structure, point of view, and the author's purpose. Integration of knowledge and ideas, multiple modes of representation. How can you best relay the information that you're trying to relay? Through a PowerPoint presentation, through presentation, multi-sensory approaches. Okay, that's one example, or three different examples, but one theme. Okay. You want to look at the validity of the argument and sufficient evidence to make the claims. You go, and then so it's your support, your backup statements to achieve whatever you want to achieve. Analysis and comparison. I'm covering the right side first because the left side are just a lot of words, and I don't want to confuse you or overwhelm you any more than I already have. So you have the analysis and comparison. How do you get there? You need to analyze how two or more texts address similar themes or topics in order to build knowledge or to compare the approaches that the authors take. Just like I reviewed previously, the differences between the IDEA and No Child Left Behind, I do a side-by-side comparison. Other students need to be able to do that too to again succeed in wherever in college or post-secondary environment. For math, these are other examples. of core curriculum content standards. These all came from the website on the bottom, which is www.achievethecore.org. These are different examples of what students should achieve at the different grade levels. I'll give you a moment to read it. Required fluencies in K through 6 for math. You're building the foundation, as you can see, according at different grade levels. Writing, you're looking to organize, edit, and maybe use technology, because technology is pretty much in every profession at this point, so students should be able to learn that skill as well, to use it. My 3-year-old niece can use technology much better than I can. She's not even in school yet. Text types and purpose. I'll give you a moment to read this. Research to build and present knowledge. Again, remember, a bunch of educators got together and said these are the skills that are necessary for children to be successful in college and in the workplace. Corporations were complaining that students did not have these skills. Comprehension and collaboration. Sorry about, again, the animation. They need to be able to write well, speak well. It's all about presentation. This is good for interviewing. This is good for making a sale, convincing other people. It's all about your presentation. If I wrote a letter that had absolutely wrong capitalization or grammar, I think that would be a problem. Your credibility goes down if you can't present well or write well. So these are obviously very important skills to make yourself, be successful, because you want to make sure everybody wants to put on a good appearance or presentation to others. So this is, again, the slide that it's a repeat of the slide that I had before. I just mentioned this. I just showed you a bunch of different standards, and then you look to what your child can do and what services and supports do they need to also learn the same skills so they can be successful as well. So lastly, you want to look to what do we know in assessing children with special needs when looking at the IEPs. You want to look to what do you know about the student? How has the student responded to academic instruction? Has the instruction worked or has it not worked? If it hasn't worked, you need to make changes to the IEP. If it has worked, maybe continue with the same approaches or build upon them. What programs, modifications, accommodations have been successful? What are the students' academic, behavioral, and social needs? Okay, because again, these are all skills that you need to be independent. It doesn't look good to go into a mall and jump up and down. It's not really considered socially appropriate. So they might need instruction in that environment to learn appropriate behavior or learn appropriate social skills. What has been learned from previous IEPs and student data that can inform decision making. you don't want to just, when you're looking at a student's profile, you don't just rely on one source of information. You don't look to one test. You look to observations, you look to IEPs, how they've made progress, you look to evaluations, data that was hopefully collected, parent report, parents are a part of the IEP team. So all of this together are going to hopefully help develop a program that addresses all of these areas so they can be successful. And is there assessment data that can provide useful information? And according to the content standards, what should the student know and be able to do? What can't they do? And how are we going to get there? Disregard the page numbers, but you want to consider the grade, the intent, and what the student must know and be able to do. Examine the environment, examine what the students are learning. Develop the present levels. Develop goals. They need to be individualized, measurable, these goals, attainable within 1 year, observable, and their positive statement, meaning the student should or shall be able to do X, Y, and Z. The student shall be able to initiate a conversation with a peer 3 out of 5 times without prompting. That's an example of a positive statement, measurable goal, and reasonably obtainable within 1 year. They need to be specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic and relevant, and time-limited. That's an example of the goal that I mentioned before. The student will be able to initiate a conversation, not just initiate a conversation, take turns in a conversation 3 out of 5 times with a peer or with an adult without prompting. Or the student will be able to wash their hands without prompting. I'm giving 3 out of 5 times as an example. You're not limited to this. 3 out of 5 times without assistance. But when you say wash their hands, can they turn on the water? Do they know where the sink is? Can they turn on the water? Can they get soap and put their hands together and wash their entire hand, not just put their tips of their fingers underneath the water and call it a day? They need to wash their entire hand, or both hands. These are samples, and don't worry, we are coming to an end. An annual goal. By March 2013, that's the time limit, the student will use a common core state standard, name whatever it is, and standards-based IEP steps to demonstrate thorough understanding of standards-based IEP development. You substitute the standard in here, with a performance of 75% of indicators scoring a 2 or a 3 as measured by an IEP quality indicator rubric. This is very specific, attainable, measurable. Okay, so you want to make sure that it's that specific. Common Core calls for the students with disabilities to have access to the same rigorous standards and challenging texts with support and scaffolding as their non-disabled peers. And these are the things to think about. How to determine what a student can accomplish in 12 months. This is with the experts of the IEP team, include parents and professionals. You want to review what they've achieved, where they are now. You look to the state standards to determine the student's current performance and compare what they're expected to achieve if they didn't have a disability. Do they have the skills? And what specially designed instruction do they need to learn those skills in the least restrictive environment? I'm going through these because a lot of it is repeat, but I'm just giving you it's broken down in a different way. Are the accommodations individualized? Are they aligned? And are they specific? Not will the student learn to engage in a socially appropriate manner. If I'm focusing here for a moment on the assistive technology, functional behavior assessment, and behavior intervention plan. If the reason that the student is not achieving a certain goal, if the reason is because they cannot, because they have behaviors, you don't just want to move them to a more restrictive setting. You want to find out what the function of the behavior is, and you want to, and what's the reason they're engaging in that behavior? What is the student trying to achieve? You can do that by collecting data to find out what happens right before the behavior occurs, what is the behavior itself, and what happens after the behavior occurs. Because it's most likely that the reason that they're engaging in the behavior is often to achieve whatever happens right after the behavior occurs. So I use this example in other presentations with my brother. He jumps up and down, and we try to identify why is he jumping up and down. The antecedent is usually I just said no to something. What's the behavior? He's jumping up and down. The consequence is that I give in because I can't stand him jumping up and down. The behavior intervention plan that follows, we're trying to just get him to stop jumping up and down. So I start ignoring that. And then he has to say, "Hi, Hillary, I want milk," and then I give in, and that's teaching him to that if he communicates, I'll give him what he wants, but jumping up and down won't get him the same outcome. So the FBA is to determine why is he doing what he's doing. The plan is to replace the socially inappropriate behavior with a positive behavior. It's not appropriate to just move the child to a more restrictive setting without trying to eliminate the behavior because, again, it's just isolating them, and then they might not have access to the same curriculum. So you can think about, you don't have to actually write this goal, but you write a goal for yourself, what you want to, where you are now and where you hope to be in a year from now. This can be your New Year's resolution a bit late. And then what skills do you need to achieve that goal? Maybe as an example of running a marathon, do you need to you need to build up muscle and endurance to get to that point so you can run a marathon in a year from now. Believe it or not, athletics, that is a core curriculum content standard. So that's even a standard that applies that everybody, that this whole team who got together to write these standards thought was important for health and fitness. Not to run a marathon, but to be able to exercise and watch your calorie intake and, maintain a healthy lifestyle. So that's just one example. And I guarantee you, any and every goal that you all write for yourselves, that's addressed through the core curriculum content standards because they're all skills that are necessary. Again, you can say it with me now, to be successful in the post-secondary environment and in life. I went through this already, so I'm really just going to skip through the transition piece of it. This is advice from the field. We should identify natural situations during the school day or during extracurricular activities for teaching functional skills. The most dangerous words, which I really like, are, I like this slide because I think it makes a really good point. She won't get anything out of it. Don't give up hope. There's no reason to say the child won't get anything out of it. They can, I'm sure the student can get something out of anything that they're exposed to. But the key is they have to be exposed to it. Okay, so instead of limiting them to certain activities, expose them to a variety of activities so they can learn what they want to achieve or what they enjoy, and not just what you think they can achieve. And this is the last slide. Questions to consider. What are the critical foundational skills? What are the underlying skills? What are the gaps? What are your priorities? What do you think is important? What is different from the grade level general education curriculum, or needs to be, what is different from the general education curriculum, and what needs to be taught in a different way? So again, if you have any questions about this, feel free to email me at Hillary, HILLARY, at Freeman, FREEMAN, law offices, S with a plural.com. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Thanks again, Hillary, and thank you all for coming out tonight and hanging with us. Again, if you missed anything or want to review the webinar, it has been recorded and will be posted on our website, which is www.autismfamilyservicesnj.org. It'll be up on our website in about a week, so you can always check there. It's usually under resources and then webinars. Again, thanks to everyone. Thank you again, Hillary, and have a good night.